And welcome to Catholics Coast to Coast, where we get to, in the midst of our Advent season, really get a deeper understanding of who God is and how He can define that, and also celebrate Christmas together. I'm Ace McKay, your host, where each and every week we like to take a look at what's happening in conversations at Podcast Central. When you go to EWTN.com/radio, you get to be encouraged and also take these with you as you travel through the Christmas holidays. So, to jumpstart into our Advent season, Catholic Radio Review with the holiday reflections, giving the fact that many of us already in the midst of overwhelming feelings for this year's Christmas, and now offering inspiration and some practical advice for celebrating the holidays in a meaningful, hope-filled way. This is Catholic Review on this week's Catholics Coast to Coast.
This is Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore, and you are listening to Catholic Review Radio. Catholic Review Radio is a weekly radio program and podcast hosted by Catholic Review Media, the news operation of the Archdiocese of Baltimore. We are grateful to our Catholic partners for the opportunity to bring quality Catholic programming to our listeners each week.
Welcome to Catholic Review Radio. I'm George Matisek. With the holidays upon us and all the many expectations that come with them, many people can feel overwhelmed at this time of the year. Paul Jarzembowski offers inspiration and some practical advice for celebrating the holidays in a meaningful, hope-filled way. Paul is the author of a newly released book from Paulus Press, Hope for the Holidays, Finding Light at the Darkest Time of the Year. Paul serves as Associate Director for Laity with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and is a parishioner of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton in Crofton. Here's our interview with Paul Jarzembowski. Paul, the subtitle of your book is Finding Light at the Darkest Time of the Year, and it's not something I've reflected a lot on, but this time of the year does come with a lot of darkness. Obviously, the days are shorter, so we all experience that physical darkness, but even metaphorically in the holidays at this time of the year, we have that awareness of the passage of time and the coming of death. And we see that in the secular holidays like Halloween or even Veterans Day, but it's also reflected in the liturgical calendar with All Souls Day and All Saints Day, and even the readings of the church. In a way, it's almost like we need to experience a bit of that kind of darkness to experience the light. And this all leads to what you call wintering. Could you explain what wintering is and how we all experience that at some point in our life?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. Wintering to me is this time where we look a little more, we're more introverted, or I should say, where there's an introversion of how we look at faith, how we look at life. Where there's a more of a consciousness that we are that there's a sense of loss of the light, but also there's a heaviness that sometimes comes with a lot of the pressures and anxieties. There's seasonal depression that certainly comes part of this, but as we reflect especially on our mortality, this is as November moves into December, the holidays and the moments of commemoration of the dead, and the readings that kind of speak of the end times. So that wintering really kind of is a time that we often kind of look within at kind of assessing where we've been through the past year, assessing our mortality, kind of understanding our frailties and things like that. So it does happen throughout our lives. And I think in the winter season, when things get darker, that wintering process becomes even more amplified.
And there's things that people are going through that others might not know about as well, a sense of loss or longing for things that can't be attained. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, the holidays, in some respects, raise up the memories of those who we have lost. Whether it is at a intentional commemoration like All Souls or Veterans Day, or if it's just memories of Thanksgivings and Christmases and New Year's that we had spent with family, with friends that have passed. And so sometimes around the holidays, the grief and the nostalgia can be almost crippling for some people, because there's a reminder that the joy of the past, there's a curiosity whether or not it can happen again. And so there's a darkness that also is in that grief. And many of these situations that people go through are often hidden. They're not, people don't see them on the outside nearly as much, but it's the thing that we do in the silence of our hearts, where we may be grieving, we may be experiencing, some mental health issues that are not necessarily visible to others. And so that the holidays sometimes conjures that up a little bit and adds a little bit to that darkness. And I guess I should also say, I'm not really saying that you definitely have to experience the darkness to experience the light, but more often than not, the darkness is very just part of life. And I think it's just admitting and accepting the fact that we have our life is full of both desolations and consolations.
One of the interesting things that you pointed out in your book is that across cultures around the world, there are more festivals at harvest time than they are at springtime, which points to some kind of need to band together to get through the darkness as the sunlight fades. Could you talk about that?
I found it very fascinating when you look at the number of, like, even in ancient cultures, the number of solstice festivals focused around the dark season. In the northern hemisphere, it's usually in November, December. In the southern hemisphere, it's usually around May or June. But it's fascinating that as you look at, historians look at where the biggest festivals are, they're usually northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere, always connected around the winter solstice. Now we in the north know it around the December timeframe, but I kind of like to think that humanity is since its dawn has been yearning to fight against the darkness, physical darkness, interior darkness, spiritual darkness, and the notion of coming together to kind of combat that, and that the light ultimately comes from community. It comes from this communion that we have. When the Christian community came along, we understood it as Jesus Christ. And that we really understood that is the ultimate light, and that the community formed around Jesus Christ can break the darkness greater than anything. And so it was that to me is just very fascinating, and it fits the pattern that humanity has been doing since the dawn of time in both the northern and southern hemispheres. We're a little bit luckier in the north that Christmas lines up with our winter solstice in our darkest time, but still there is that just that idea that we as a human species are constantly looking to fight against the darkness.
When you talk about hope, what is hope? I mean, from a secular point of view, it's almost like this magical yearning for something to make something happen, or wishing. But there's also a theological definition of hope. What is hope?
So for Christians, for us, we have a faith that's grounded in hope. I mean, without the resurrection, we wouldn't be Christians. The ultimate hope that was fulfilled in Jesus Christ, that there was death and then there was resurrection. So the ultimate definition of hope is Christ. And that example that we see, that we can see in our own lives, that every cross is just an avenue to a resurrection. And hope, as I see it, and I think as the church understands it, is that God always has something greater on the horizon for us. No matter our darkest days, there is always something greater. And life is full of desolations and consolations, moments where there is no hope, and then consolations result from that. And the ultimate consolation that we will have in our life is union with God. And so, as I like to think, there's always an upswing that's waiting for us. No matter how down the downswing is, God always promises an upswing, including the last upswing we will ever experience, which is life with the Lord in heaven. So hope is always possible. And I think part of the reason I really wanted to raise it up is because at this dark time of year, you know, we can feel very hopeless. Even those of us who are active in our faith can feel hopeless. And so I wanted to write this as a reminder that um, that this is the season where we can find it, but not to find it in some shallow, hollow, inauthentic way, but really kind of going back to that reason for the season, if I can use a phrase, that the ultimate hope is in Christ, and that there's always something greater just around the corner.
I think there's even a lack of hope in the wider culture. If you just look the state of the tensions in our country, in our church, across the board, there's this sense of a lack of hope, I think.
Yeah, people can feel defeated and defeatist and, nihilistic, and feeling like there's a lot of catastrophizing. This is the worst ever. And it can really calcify ourselves. We kind of become suspicious of one another because we don't have hope in each other, in the Christ that lives within each other. So we grow suspicious of each other. So, and I'm not to say that we have to be Pollyanna about everything, but certainly the opposite extreme which is where we often are in our wider culture. And yeah, there's a lot of evidence pointing to, be hopeless. There's wars, there's polarization, there's the economy, the poverty, name the issue. Yeah, there's a lot of evidence to point that direction. But we as people of faith know that the evidence on the other side, that God delivers, and he's had a history of delivering for us from the dawn of creation. God has always delivered. So we have to kind of reconnect with that hope that God has for us, and not be succumb to the defeatism that I think is very prevalent in our culture today.
You structure your book around a lot of the themes from A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, and it's obvious that you have a great love for that work. When were you first exposed to that book, and why did you choose to structure your book around those kinds of themes?
I'll be honest, in the first exposure I had to the story was really through the movies. Growing up, whether it's Mickey's Christmas Carol or the Muppets Christmas Carol, or, as I grew into other versions that I would see through the years. So the movies really, and the television adaptations really brought me into the story. And it's always been a favorite annual tradition to pull that out. It's only recently that I really discovered the book, and the book is even more in depth than those televised or adaptations. So yeah, I found that to be something that I gravitated towards, and it gives me hope each year, because how often I find myself in Scrooge's place at the beginning Scrooge, and so that story is one of a hopeless individual, and people seeing a lot of hopelessness in him, moving toward a person of great hope, and that people can find hope in his actions by the end. So it's a great story that I found as I was reflecting on this theme. It seemed to me to be the perfect complementary piece to use and it's also a great entry point for people who may not be, and I wrote this not only for people of faith, but people who don't have as much faith. And I knew that would be an easy entry point for some people to kind of get behind some of these themes that might make it more palatable for those who may be on the margins or on the peripheries of our communities.
One of the great things you did in this book is raise the question of, what if our own Jacob Marley would come back to us and review our lives to this point? What will we see? And it's almost like an examination of conscience.
Yeah, I will say, you'll also find in there the Nation Examine, Desolation and Consolation. My Jesuit roots are certainly on display as I wrote this book. So a very, my Jesuit educators would be proud to know that I'm sharing some of the traditions that St. Ignatius has for our church.
Well, we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, we'll dig into some of the practical things that Paul raises for ways that we can cultivate a sense of hope in our lives. Our guest today is Paul Jarzembowski. He is the author of a new book called Hope for the Holidays, Finding Light at the Darkest Time of the Year. And he's also a parishioner of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton in Crofton. I'm George Matysek. You're listening to Catholic Review Radio. We'll be back in a moment.
I have been a school sister of Notre Dame for 72 years.
Most senior Catholic sisters, brothers, and religious order priests serve for years with little pay.
I always taught the primary grades, and I loved it.
Today, hundreds of religious communities lack retirement funds. Your gift to the Retirement Fund for Religious helps provide medications and care. Please give to those who have given a lifetime.
Thank you, and God bless you 100-fold.
Donate at your local parish.
Remember the spirit of your parish community, the power of worshiping together, the warmth of friends new and old who share your faith. Join us for Mass this weekend. Visit archbald.org to find a Catholic parish near you. Feel the joy.
This is Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore, and you are listening to Catholic Review Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Review Radio. I'm George Matysek. Our guest today is Paul Jarzembowski. He is the author of a new book called Hope for the Holidays, Finding Light at the Darkest Time of the Year. Paul, what are some of the ways that people can actually go about cultivating a sense of hope in their lives?
I would say the first step is the first step that in my telling of the story that's kind of grounded in A Christmas Carol. I kind of think of Scrooge kind of caught up in his very alone in his chamber, locked in as Jacob Marley visits him. And it was only in the silence that he was able to move forward in the journey. And I often say that for us is a great first step. So a very practical thing is finding moments for silence in our day, that practicing silence. The holiday season is a very noisy season at times. And, we've got everything coming at us. We've got songs, we've got movies, we've got merriment, we've got all kinds of things. And they're wonderful. And even in church, we have Advent this and Advent that, and we've got this celebration and that. And there can be a lot of noise even in our personal lives, not to mention our work lives, our studies, our personal family lives, a lot of noise. So the first practical thing to kind of move into any of these steps is just really to carve out moments of silence. And when someone says, well, I don't have time for silence, my argument would be that God graces us. We admit to ourselves, God graces us with these moments that we could use, such as the drive into the office, for instance. If you've got a commute of 5 minutes or 50 minutes, or whatever length it is, that to use that time and to turn off the radio, to turn down the noise, even in our own heads, and just to use that, for instance, on a daily basis for moments of silence. And there could be other times throughout the holiday seasons that we can do this as well. Finding a sacred space to do that is very helpful. But even if that isn't possible, throughout our day, finding time for silence, that's just the first step. There's many other steps, but I think the first step is silence.
I know during Lent, a lot of people do social media fasts. And if you think about it, I know how much time I spend just scrolling, looking at news stories and stuff. If you take away that time, you've got an hour or two or you could devote to reflection and silence.
Right. And it doesn't have to be a planned thing, and it doesn't have to be even long. If 5 minutes of silence is what you can start with, 5 minutes is fine. But kind of creating a new discipline for ourselves in the holiday season, that could be a very practical way. And in that silence, God will start speaking to us. And that's where we can start finding that hope. But sometimes it has to start by us stopping.
You talk about the power of nostalgia in your book as also a way of not only cultivating hope, but looking back on the past. What are some of the ways people can do that practically?
Yeah, the holidays especially around Christmas, because of those memories that sometimes can cause some bittersweetness, remembrances of people who have passed. I found that, again, using silence perhaps as a launch board, um, taking out of old photo albums, or if you are on social media, scrolling back farther and farther and farther into the past of your social media account and reflecting on those moments in the past and reflecting on them in a sense of gratitude. And in that, perhaps even finding some roots, some cultural roots that maybe are part of our story that we may have not done in a while, we may have forgotten, or maybe we didn't learn as much, such as a favorite food or a favorite tradition, whether it's a domestic tradition in our homes, or whether it's a religious tradition, but something that's maybe connected to our ethnic or racial culture. Kind of rediscovering that and maybe using this holiday season as an opportunity to resurrect it and to find a new place for it in our lives. It connects us back to our ancestors in faith, whether that ancestor is our grandparents, our culture from Europe or from Africa or from Asia, wherever we're from. Or perhaps it comes from just something that is special to us in who we are in our lives. Maybe something that we connect with our friends or loved ones, maybe as recently as a few years ago. So I think finding time to do that, and in that, we find, again, a sense of hope, because, again, when we look at our past, we see God's handiwork in our past, and we see that our lives in the past have been also occasions where hope has been fulfilled, whether it was as simple as maybe a project that we got finished and we accomplished because we didn't know if it ever would accomplish, or maybe it was a major hope in our lives, such as, we fell in love and we hoped that would end in marriage, and it did. We longed for a family and God provided. We looked for a job or a career or a direction in our life, and there God was giving that to us. There was a healing that needed to happen, and it did. So when we look back at our nostalgia, we also look back at those moments when God graced us with hope in the past. And it gives us the confidence to know that looking forward, whatever catastrophe, whatever issue that we're going through at this moment, that God has a great track record, and we know it in our lives, and we have more of a confidence that we can put our hope in God this time. I know it's a little bit of a technique for a doubting Thomas, perhaps, that needs to see the hope in the past to understand that hope is possible in the future. But that's what sometimes looking to our past does for us, is it reminds us that God has been gracing to us all throughout our lives and all throughout our family story.
Yeah, I think it's so important to hold on to those ethnic traditions, even if you don't regularly practice them, to rediscover them. In our family, on the Czech, my father's side is Czech, so every Christmas and Easter, we always make kolačky, or I make kolačky, which is a Czech cookie, and then a Czech pastry. And then we also, on the Polish side of the family, we make the pierogi, we do the opłatki, and then we do the chalk blessing on Three Kings Day, Epiphany.
Okay. Yeah.
So those are, and with a name like Jarzembowski, I know you also have some of those traditions in your family.
Absolutely. It was great. I was even recalling, I call in the book the tradition that my grandparents would have an upside down Christmas tree hanging in the basement on Christmas Day. And I just thought they were weird. But then the more when I did my own exploration of my story, I discovered there's a history to that. And that upside down Christmas tree has roots in Poland. And that's what my grandparents were doing. They weren't just being strange people who didn't know how to put up a Christmas tree, but that was a tradition that went back centuries. And it was great to relearn. And then by me relearning, it was a chance for me to feel in a sense of solidarity, like I was walking through those holiday memories with my grandparents as fellow travelers. And they've passed on since, but it gave me a renewed sense of love and purpose and connection to my roots.
We have about a minute left. You talk a lot about movies, Christmas movies in this book. Is there one single favorite of yours that kind of inspires hope?
For me, White Christmas, and I guess for me, the hope that it kind of comes in is that, the story, I don't want to give away too much for spoilers for those who haven't seen this 60-some-year-old movie, but it's a story where the memories of those who inspire us, our mentor figures, that we can then honor our mentors, and we have the ability to do that. And so for me, that I keep thinking to myself, all the people in my life who have been my teachers and who have kind of guided and directed me, kind of like the general directed Bing Crosby or whatever their names are in the movie. But it causes me to go back to those kinds of experiences, and again, that gives me some hope that it's possible. And who can I then mentor for the next generation?
Great. Well, our guest today has been Paul Jarzembowski. He is the author of Hope for the Holidays, Finding Light at the Darkest Time of the Year. And he's also a parishioner of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton in Crofton. And you will be giving a special presentation at your home parish. Could you tell us about that? That's going to be on St. Nicholas Day, December 6th.
Yeah, on St. Nick's Day, December 6th in the evening, 7 p.m. at St. Elizabeth Seton in Crofton. I'll be kind of unpacking, doing a little bit of this, but in a more reflective way, so that people can take the moment to reflect on their hopes and hopefully kind of renew their hope as they kind of get ready for Advent and Christmas.
And people could get your book there. And where else could they get your book?
They can get my book there. They can get it online at paulistpress.com, their favorite online bookseller. Even the Barnes & Noble in Annapolis will be stocking it this year.
Great. Well, Paul, thanks so much for being here on Catholic Review Radio.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, becoming a Hope-a-holic during the Advent season, that is the Catholic Review. As we continue Advent, don't forget you can catch up on previous or future episodes when you go to Catholic Radio Review section at EWTN.com/radio. Easy to find, and we'll look forward to taking that with us as we travel for the holidays. I'm Ace McKay. This is Catholics Coast to Coast, and we're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we're going to continue our Advent reflections, as maybe a little shopping is something you've been trying to conquer, and it's on everyone's mind. Father Joseph, Lauren, and Daniel helping us to discuss how shopping for material goods can impact our spiritual life, and for the positive and negative within that. So we'll do that with Restless coming up next on Catholics Coast to Coast.
If it's central to the faith, you can find it on EWTN Podcast Central, featuring the best of EWTN Radio, as well as faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates across the nation, all in one place, all free. The destination for great Catholic audio programming is EWTN Podcast Central. It's like podcast heaven. Visit EWTN.com/radio/podcasts today.
Welcome back to Restless. My name is Father Joseph Gill, priest of the Diocese of Bridgeport, Connecticut, and you've joined Lauren and Daniel as together we restlessly seek the face of Christ in today's crazy and mixed-up world. You guys are here, so clearly you're not out shopping.
I will not be participating.
You're not? No? What about you, Lauren? Are you a Black Friday shopper?
I have never been a Black Friday shopper.
No, me neither. But no, every Black Friday, usually I have a little sports day for some of the fathers and sons from Cardinal Kung. We get together and just play some football. And yeah, so I'm going to be heading up to Ridgefield shortly to go and have that little sports day. Should be a lot of fun. Should be good weather, God willing.
Do you use a public park or a playing field?
We use a public park or a school if it's raining. But yeah, I think the Black Friday stuff is absolutely insane. I mean, what do you guys think? Like, because they start sometimes like Thanksgiving night.
They do indeed. You see the videos at least, but I have seen it on the highway. I've never participated, but driving down 95, you go by Walmart, in Stratford or so, and you can see on the highway all the parking lot filled up on Thanksgiving night if you're coming back from, say, seeing family in Eastern Connecticut, as I tend to do.
Yeah.
So it starts early.
Which is amazing because today everybody shops online, right? I mean, what percentage of your shopping do you think you do online versus in person?
It depends, I guess, what I'm buying. I do both. I'm not like
try on the clothes.
Well, yeah, but I have bought clothing online too now. I typically don't have patience for shopping for clothing in the store. Like I just tire out immediately a lot of the time.
What tires you out? The sales clerks or?
Just everything. I don't want to be in the store. I don't want to go through looking for things, right? I like to buy things that are on sale, so that takes more time, right? Like finding something that's actually placed in the right spot, when they organize by size. Yeah. So I often I don't have the energy for it often, but clothing generally, yes, in the store. I don't do it very often either.
Yeah. This may sound totally priggish, but it's for me certainly true. I get like almost like physically nauseated just by being around so much like worldliness when you walk into a store. It's just everything is like, it's just so consumerist, and it just, to me, I don't know, and it of course never bothered me, but as I advanced in spiritual life, I was like, this is so shallow, just so empty. I don't know.
When you say store, though, do you mean any kind of store? When you say that, I'm picturing like an outlet store, a store at a mall.
Yeah.
Where stores come in all shapes and sizes.
That's true. Yeah, I don't mean like, grocery store. Not the grocery store. More like an outlet store,
Target, sure. Walmart,
Target makes me rage.
Costco.
It's red. Or like Macy's or something like that. It's just like everything is to draw you into spending money. That's it. It's the entire purpose. And I don't know. It feels like vapid.
You're on another level, Father.
Maybe,
probably than most
I've never
people.
understood how people can appreciate that. So yeah, so now that Christmas is like a month away. Like, do you find most of your shopping to be Christmas shopping at this point?
I haven't started.
No?
No, I'm very bad at shopping for people. I find it difficult. It's difficult to buy for people. Maybe it depends on one's personality, how one feels about this, but I'm always worried it won't be a very good gift, which leads me to then delay the process until very late in the game, which only increases anxiety.
Yeah.
But I found that gift giving, like if you think about a wedding these days, I think there was once upon a time, my understanding is, say, when my parents' generation was getting married, there was no internet, there was no registry. And so people simply brought something they thought would be a good gift, is my understanding, right? You didn't just produce a registry as a wedded couple. And in general, the culture, there was more spontaneity, serendipity, creative choice. But now gift giving is often kind of boring because people just send you a link. I want X. You hit the button and they get it. So I've been buying off people's registries recently for weddings.
That's true.
It's just kind of boring. It's like shopping isn't as interesting. And then, though, people are so particular today, with their food, with their clothing, with XYZ, and you feel like you're never going to satisfy them. So,
which I even find with Christmas gifts, because I always ask my parents, well, what do you want for Christmas? And they're like, well, if I tell you, it's not going to be a surprise. Like, so surprise us. And I'm like, oh man, you just made it 10 times harder. I want to know what you want. But I hear you about like the pressure of feeling like you have to get the right gift. And
Right. And I don't know. It's stressful.
Yeah.
I think there could be some input where there's still some choice, right? Like I could ask for a serving tray, for instance. I could definitely use more. But I don't know what type they're going to get me.
Are you telling us you want us to get you a serving tray?
Yeah, that's like on my list. If I have an aunt that always asks, what can I get you? Last year I said bowls. Okay, I had no bowls. I was thinking they would become, they would be glass, like 3, but instead I got like 6, and they're silver, but they're also colored.
Cool.
There's some variety, in what people can shop for and choose for you.
But see, that drives me crazy as a recipient because I like to pick my own stuff. Like I've always felt very uncomfortable, especially when people give me clothes, because I'm like, well, that's nice, but that's not at all what I would have picked or worn. Or
do you ever come around and wear it, or do you return it?
Yeah, like a family gave me this really nice sweatshirt that it's from the company Spider, and has a spider on it, and I am deathly afraid of spiders.
Wow.
And
it
took me
know
a long
that.
time. I'm definitely afraid of spiders.
But they did not know that.
I don't know if they did. I mean, it's really nice. It's a nice sweatshirt. They didn't think of it. And so it took me a long time to get to the point where I'm like, I can wear this thing and not actually like look down and freak myself out because I think there's a giant spider on my chest.
Wow. That is a severe case of arachnophobia.
It's pretty bad.
Goodness gracious.
That scene from Lord of the Rings with the big spider, I had to close my eyes.
Yeah, I didn't like that scene either.
That
to tell you the truth.
Goodness.
I don't like the spider brand either. I think the same thing.
Yeah.
Why would you want a spider
creepy.
on you? Yeah.
I've never heard of the spider brand.
It's creepy.
It's creepy.
Yeah, it looks like a spider.
None of us are fans.
Nope.
Do either of you quickly re-gift gifts, return gifts, or donate gifts? Any of the above?
Yes.
You just without remorse.
Shameless.
I'm not going to say it was without
shameless,
without a sense of no compunction.
All of the kids here at Cardinal Kung have eaten re-gifts. People give me cookies and pies, and I bring it in.
For perishables, that's a no-brainer. But actual gifts that are not food, but
I re-gift that too.
Fast.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sometimes the next day.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's been moments where that's worked out nicely. Like I got a kind of Lauren-themed girly package thing for my birthday with like a candle and chapstick, and I re-gifted that to someone else's birthday because it was so nice, and I'm like, oh, this just solves my problem.
And I bet they re-gifted it to someone else. The cycle continues.
Actually, you know what happened? So it came with a chapstick, which was this excellent chapstick. So I took the chapstick out. I wanted to keep that. I go through them all the time. And I'm on like my 4th day in a row that I forgot chapstick. It is brutal. But I took that out. I gave it, right? And the recipient was like, you didn't have to get me anything, but it was a 30th birthday and there was a big party. So then her mom liked it so much that she wanted to know where it came from.
Oh, no.
So I had shoot.
Awkward.
But I found it. I found something. I don't know what I had that said the website, but then I thought, if she looks this up, she may notice something is missing.
Oh, no.
And it was like totally Lauren themed, but I just pulled that part out somehow. I don't know. But yeah, I did. I sweat that one a little bit, but who knows?
As the old line goes, oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive.
Yes, tangled webs just like spider.
Just like spiders.
Spider gear.
That's right.
Weaves a web. Yeah, and part of it too is, I try to live a very simple life, and I feel like, it's very easy to just accumulate things when people give you gifts, and especially gifts that are not necessarily like needs but wants. I've gotten better at trying to accept it as knowing that the receiver is doing it out of love, but still, that's why I often regift, is because I'm just like, I can't keep filling my house, my room with stuff, and especially as a priest, you move every 5 or 7 years, and the next time I move, I'm going to have a ton of stuff to either throw away or give away or haul with me in my next assignment.
What you just said reminded me of an anecdote about sort of the spirit in which you receive things. I was once in Rome outside of church talking with a couple after Mass, and a homeless man came up, or beggar of some kind came up, and he wanted to give, it was something so sort of silly, like I think it was a notebook. He had these clean, unused notebooks, and he, of course, wanted money, but he wanted to give something. And the wife of this couple was willing to give him the money, throw him €1 or 2. But she said, I do not want the notebook. I do not want the notebook. She was very resistant. I'm not going to give the money if you give me the notebook. But he insisted on giving the notebook because to him,
because it's more dignity.
More dignity. Yeah. And so she eventually relented, but it was sort of bothering her almost on a level of pride that she would get this thing. Like, I don't want this thing. Like this thing is, I don't need it. It's silly. Don't give it to me. I'm only giving you the money. She's a very nice person, but it just bothered her that she'd be getting this thing that to her was a piece of junk. But he, on the other hand, had that perspective, as you just said, that he had a sense of dignity when he was giving something and getting something in return. He wasn't just an object of charity.
Well, our Lord said it is more blessed to give than to receive.
Right.
And so he wanted that blessing of the knowledge that he had something to contribute to society, something to contribute to the world.
That's right.
So back to shopping, because probably many people are listening to this in their cars as they're driving from one store to another. Obviously there's a difference between needs and wants, right? And shopping for needs is completely legitimate. But what do you think shopping for wants is, on the spiritual level? Like, is it okay to buy yourself a 3rd pair of shoes? Is it okay to buy yourself that thing that you just see in kind of impulse, like, oh, I'd really like to have that, and you kind of reach out and grab it? Is that good? Is that bad? Is it neutral? Where do you think the line is?
I think most people are probably overbuying and having more than what they need. It's just part of the culture, I think, right? Especially with online shopping, it makes things so easy. I personally do not fall into that, I wouldn't think. Always just had kind of, this is what I need, right? Like 1 or 2 of this type of shoe. Mm-hmm. Like 1 winter jacket that
But there are women with 80 pairs of shoes out there.
Yeah. That I have a good amount of shoes, of different types, but I'm not trying to say that I don't, but I don't know. I have 3 pairs of sneakers right now. That's a lot.
That is a lot.
But I bought 2 at the same time and they both fit. And so now I've had them for like at least 2 years.
Yeah, so you'll use
them. 1 pair wore out actually. And then my dad got me a pair for Christmas that I kept, Mm-hmm. And then I have like my actual running sneakers.
Yeah.
Right? But 2 is probably my max that I ever have that are like currently in use, And I definitely let things wear out quite a bit, before I,
Yeah, and I think that's part of
replace.
Perhaps Christ calls us to a certain simplicity. Not the poverty of the Franciscans, but as Christians, it's easy. I think it's very hard to live that poverty of spirit when you really are surrounded by all the things you wanted. I don't know. That's my perspective, but
that's well said. Can I just ask Lauren a question? Those 2 or 3 pairs of sneakers, do you use them for exactly the same purpose, or are they actually different kinds of sneakers that serve different roles?
Well, 1 is running, gym. 2 are Nike, more casual. Can't run in them. They're not like made for that. And then 3 is, I guess, more of like a walking kind of shoe. I wouldn't run in it either. So like 2 are kind of the same, but different styles.
I think you do have to factor that in, because like if you're doing athletics, you might have a pair of shoes that you run in, a pair of shoes you lift weights in, and then neither of those is just the pair of sneakers you'd use taking a walk.
Right.
You know, and you use shoes for different reasons. They're built in different ways. It's not really 3 of the same thing. It's just like a generic category we call sneakers, but you're using each one for a different purpose. And so it seems like money well spent, because it's also about, protecting your foot.
Yep.
So I think those things are actually real considerations. Otherwise, I mean, if you're going to do athletics, you have to take care of your body. It would be imprudent to do otherwise.
Definitely.
I agree in concept, but I think, I think we can always take that to the extreme, because we can always find a rationalization for everything that we purchase,
Right.
I mean, I could get every household kitchen gadget when a knife works perfectly fine. It's like all the stuff you see on QVC, right? It chops, it dices, it slices, it does 1,000 different things. But wait, there's more, right? And you're like, oh, I need that. Do you really need that? No, I mean, like I can do just as much with a knife. It might take me 5 minutes longer, but it's also going to save me $79.99. And
how many dress shoes do you have currently, Father?
I have 3 pairs of dress shoes.
Have you replaced the ones that leak?
No, I have not. And that's
okay. So
I get criticized for that. But.
This one day we met in Norwalk to record, and it was raining terribly, and there was a ton of traffic.
It was not raining when I left the house.
Father Joseph was late, understandably, because he came the farthest, and then he got out of his car barefoot. And so, of course, Joe and I met him, and we're like, why is Father barefoot? I mean, Joe said it. I actually wasn't going to say anything. I was going to be like, all right, he's barefoot, odd, but I'm not going to comment. But Joe did, and then he told us that his shoes leak water.
Yeah, anytime.
So better to be barefoot.
Yeah.
Or replace the shoes?
One could do that, I suppose. I don't know. There's just something that's freeing about not having to worry about a lot of things. And part of it, too, I fully admit, I struggle with being a cheapskate.
Yeah, that's not good, though.
That's not penny pincher.
Yeah.
No, but it also opens up the door to a lot of other things.
What do you mean?
Because, for example, in the next couple of years, I have to buy a new car. My car is almost 14 years old, and it's doing all right, but it's kind of on its last legs. But because I've pinched my pennies for the last 14 years, I can pay cash. I don't have to get a financing plan.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, I've shortchanged myself on small things so that I can not have to worry about debt.
Yeah, I agree with that. I bought my car in cash too. I save a lot, but
I mean, it boggles my mind. During COVID, people were saying like 60, 80% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
That boggles my mind. And I know sometimes circumstances, you have to do that, but the credit card debt that we all carry, do we really need?
Who carries credit card debt? I
mean,
I know
really spend all the money we make every week, every month.
It's a major problem, I guess, for thousands of Americans.
It is, yeah.
Well, currently,
are we living above our means?
It's a lot due to inflation, unfortunately.
Partly now, yeah.
That people have to pay for the essentials with their credit cards.
Yeah.
That's kind of terrifying.
That is
when
kind of
you think
terrifying.
About interest racking up on that. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it is a common problem that people overspend. But I've never understood that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, do you make budgets?
I'm just frugal.
In your life, or just have a mental budget, or like this month I can spend X amount of dollars on.
Never.
No, you just kind of wing it.
Yeah, but I don't buy that much.
Yeah.
I don't know. I buy things that are on sale typically all the time, especially in the grocery store, or I shop at Trader Joe's. That's my favorite store now because I live near it.
Mm.
And their prices are generally cheaper than the grocery store and produce and things. So yeah, I don't eat out really, like ever. I don't buy takeout. I just make tuna fish or like something from the freezer if I'm in a rush, unless I'm going out with a friend or something.
Right, or social.
Then I will. But yeah, I don't know.
So people that often do struggle with kind of spending too much. Do you think there's this underlying spiritual struggle that they're going through? Is it maybe trying to fill a void? Is it just greed and materialism? Is it, finding their security in things rather than finding their security in God? Like what could motivate that?
I think it could be all of those things. Many people probably are living a shallow life, right? Like lacking a real faith and relationship with Christ. So they're living for worldly, status, right?
Yeah.
Making money, having a lot of things, driving a nice car, dressing well, going out to dinner, spending a lot at dinner, right? That's all shallow. Like that cannot fulfill you. That's impossible. But people just continue to fill that void, right?
I wonder too if there's like a keeping up with the Joneses, right?
Yeah,
Because you see that other guy get an Escalade. Well, I've got to get an Escalade just to show that I'm successful in my business, and whatever that is.
Definitely.
I think certainly. I don't know that the Aristotelian in me wants to put the other side here, just because we're making this point very well. But there is another side to it. There's those who wear, lumpy clothing, and it's actually just as much a vice as someone who's spending outside his means.
What do you mean by that?
Someone who just simply has no appreciation of beauty or no appreciation of good quality, and then he's quick to say, "Oh, you're just wearing nice clothing because you're shallow." But it might be, no, I'm wearing nice clothing because I appreciate good clothing, well-made clothing, good fabrics, good materials, handmade materials, a store run by someone who can find me clothing that suits my body well and makes me look my best. And so so a tendency not to have good things could well be not a consequence of prudence about money, but just an indifference to how we appear to others, an indifference to beauty, an indifference to a sense of like what your role is. Like I, as a teacher at Cardinal Comey, right, the students all have to, like the boys, I'll think of the boys, they all have to wear a tie and a shirt and pants. So I consider one of my roles to model how to be an appropriately dressed man. Doesn't mean that I have $1,000 suits, but I'm going to wear clean clothing. I'm going to replace the shirts when they get weathered, when they get stained, because I'm showing respect for them. I'm showing respect for the school. I'm showing respect for Latin, the material that I teach, through how I present myself. And I don't think we should lose sight of that, because that's traditionally why, all Christians wore their Sunday best, right? Is that you bring your best to God. How you sort of exteriorly present yourself is a reflection of your interior life. So I just want to put forward, because, right, in Aristotle, right, you always want to seek sort of the middle between two extremes. So we can, on the one hand, and this is our tendency in our culture with a lot of things, is to spend way too much money, to spend outside of our means, and therefore perhaps live paycheck to paycheck. But I think a lot of Americans simultaneously are also going the opposite direction the other way. Like you look around, and what percentage of Americans wear clothing that fits them? Our tendency is to wear clothing that's a size or two too big. All that matters is our own comfort.
Or sometimes ladies, size or two is too small.
Or size too small. Yep. And I think that's a vice as well. It's just a different kind of vice. But sometimes, no, the appropriate thing is to spend money to present yourself in the appropriate way relative to your station in life.
That's a really interesting perspective. I've never really thought about that or heard that perspective, that, appreciating the good things that God has created and the talents of others in making clothes and appliances and things could actually be, virtue.
I think so.
Where's the balance, right? Because, I know Christ really emphasizes poverty of spirit.
Right.
But poverty of spirit doesn't necessarily mean poverty.
Right.
Right. So how can you be poor in spirit when you like and delight in the finest fashions and the latest technology and gadgets and big screen TVs and
I think it's a difficult question. I think it's more a spiritual question that then has sort of material consequences than something that begins with the consideration of the material, right? Because even something like, this is a kind of a random example, but I remember Pope Benedict, when he was, I forget now, it was before he was Pope. I'm not sure what it was, whether he was still a cardinal, what have you, but he drove a Mercedes. But not because he was a priest, who's living the high life. But Mercedes are super common in Germany. And you can get a Mercedes for a much lower price because they're just so common. You can get used ones. It's a nice car, but it doesn't mean he spent a fortune on it. So I think you have to consider those circumstances, but begin with the inner life. Same thing with money. Whatever much money we have, there's always someone with way more. So we look at that other person and say, I can't believe he went out to eat at that restaurant. I would only eat at this lower level restaurant. How could he spend so much? But if that person's making $1 million a year, $100 at dinner is actually proportionally maybe what for someone who makes, $100,000 a year is $10 at dinner.
Yeah.
Right? And if you make $50,000 a year, suddenly it's $5. So I think you do have to consider those things in relative terms. So I think there's no absolute answer there. Instead, it has to begin with the interior life. Are you attached? Is your life dictated by these things? Can you renounce them? Mm-hmm. Can you engage in a fast, a little fast, maybe at Advent, a fast at Lent? If you realize you cannot fast from those things, then those things are controlling you.
Yeah.
I think that's one way to test it.
I would say in response, 3 things. Lauren's nodding your head. I think you agree with Daniel?
Yes.
I would say 3 things in response. First of all, tithing is a requirement for Catholics. So 10%. Yeah, if you're not tithing, then you should not be spending any extra money on this or that. I think you're absolutely right about your state in life, because for a lay person to go to an expensive dinner is very different than for a priest to go to an expensive dinner. And even though I'm a diocesan priest and haven't taken a vow of poverty, I know tongues have wagged. And there's an old joke that the priests know the finest restaurants in town.
That's right.
Because we are blessed. I'm very blessed as a priest. There's very little that I have to pay for. I don't have to pay for my house. I don't have to pay for my food. My
car insurance, health insurance.
Car insurance is covered. Health insurance is covered. I just have to pay for my cell phone and incendiary, other stuff.
Incidental.
Yes.
Incendiary. Nothing incendiary. Hope.
Burning. I think.
Yes. Maybe you're a cigarette smoker. But.
Yeah. But so it's really like very small stuff. So we do have a lot of disposable income, much more so than somebody that has 3 or 4 kids.
Right.
So there's that element with I need to make sure that the scandal factor is not there. So.
That's a very good point. But it does turn people off.
It does. It does. Absolutely. And I don't know. To me though, you talk about not being attached to your goods. I just think it's very hard to not be attached when you have them and love them and cherish them. Literally everything we want is on Amazon at our fingertips. I have 2 clicks and I get the entire world delivered to me for free.
In 2 days.
In 2 days.
If you're a Prime member.
In 2 days.
I'm not a Prime member.
I'm not either.
Yeah, our church is a Prime member, so I get another perk of being a priest. Amazon Prime.
I can wait, a week and a half.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'm not usually a urgent buyer.
But it's just remarkable that I think that's something that we always have to be on the guard for, especially this time of year, which is so focused on the material aspect of Christmas, that the interior journey when Mary and Joseph had nothing, right? They gave birth to Jesus in a borrowed stable. Keeps it in perspective, I think.
I'd like to commend you, Father, because in a conversation outside of these shows, you've spoken about tithing, and you mentioned something that you've observed. I don't know if this is a general observation about a particular church here in this neighborhood, but that Protestants have, generally speaking, a greater spirit of tithing, or at least many individual Protestant churches do.
Yeah.
So you have these churches with very small congregations that nevertheless the minister is able to get by.
Yeah,
You've observed it, right?
Yeah, I observed it, right? The church right next to Cardinal Kung Academy is a Lutheran church, and we had a student here who used to belong to that church, and I asked her, does your minister have a second job? I'm like, no. I was like, well, how do they support? There's literally like 100 people that come to that church, and yeah, we all just tithe. I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
Right?
It did amaze me. It did amaze me because you can do so much good for the kingdom by our generosity. A lot of times we're like, oh yeah, I'm keeping the lights on at my parish, but no, you're actually helping the gospel to be preached, because otherwise I got to get a job and I won't be able to run our youth group and do funerals and visit the sick, right? Because if I have to work 40 hours a week, so it helps the kingdom.
Why do you think people are reluctant to give as much as they should?
Well, I think it's the lack of trust that God is actually going to provide.
Trusting God or trusting the parish or the diocese?
A large part of trusting God. Right before this, about an hour ago, I got a text from a dear friend of mine who's a parishioner at St. Jude's, who said, pray for me. Me and my wife just found out that we were pregnant with our 3rd child. We don't know how we can afford it. And he's, certainly going to keep the child. It's no way is he thinking about ending the life, but it's like, he's really worried. But I'm like, just trust God. And there's a Russian proverb that says, every baby is born with a loaf of bread under its arm. In other words, God's going to provide. If we just surrender to Him. So, and that's the truth we got to realize in this Black Friday. As much as we shop, that's not where our hope is going to be found.
That's right.
Definitely shop, without a doubt. Enjoy, as Daniel said, the good things. Enjoy giving gifts to others, but never forget that the true gift is, first of all, the spiritual gifts, right? Of praying for others, spending time with others, a smile, acts of service. But ultimately, that the gift is what God has given to us. in Jesus Christ, our Savior.
How do we enjoy the goods of this earth? Well, keeping our hearts set on heaven that is restless as we continue this week's Catholics Coast to Coast. And if you want to catch up on previous episodes of Restless, you can always check that out. Just go to our Podcast Central section at EWTN.com/radio. And then, of course, each and every week we get a chance to see what's happening in the midst of those conversations. That's going to do it for this week. As we continue our Advents, we'll continue more reflections in the weeks to come. But remember this week to let God define who you are, and I'll see you again on Catholics Coast to Coast.